Hey everybody, welcome to Tech Talk 14. This talk is going to be skill issue. I'm Mathias Palmersheim. I'm on the solutions engineering team at VictoriaMetrics, and we have a new co-host this week. Roman, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Roman. I'm engineer manager at VictoriaMetrics, and yeah, nice to see you all.
Yeah. Roman and I were actually just talking about last week's show, and we need to go over a couple of corrections from last time. Um, So last week, as I was filling in Roman right before this, was we were actually talking about my cats and using vmanomaly to detect if my cats were using the litter box the correct amount. And there's actually two updates on that. One is the anomaly detection config Fred and I came up with actually found a problem with our litter box like the day after the stream ended. So I have a litter robot. So it's a robot that will clean up the litter and like monitor how often the cats are using it and if it's full or not. So that way you don't have to change it out every day or remember to like basically have a cron job inside of your head. You can get a notification from an app or home assistant. Um, and the
And how it's called, like litter box is overflown, or like ETA for overflown is like 2 days.
so the pipeline for it is basically I connect the litter robot to Home Assistant, and Home Assistant has a Prometheus endpoint for all the metrics. And then the metrics include like the weight of both cats, and if the litter box, I think it's just a binary, like if it's full or not. It doesn't have like a utilization.
Yeah, I'm instantly getting this image from Rick and Morty, like, and Prometheus asking you, "What is my purpose?" And you're saying you like monitoring my cats.
Yeah, I just thought the juxtaposition of using like state of the art machine learning and an alerting pipeline that's similar to like a Neo Cloud or like one of our bigger customers is also being used to check on my cats.
Yeah, I wonder, by the way, if like any AI that you use is actually learning from telemetry collected from your cats and communicating it back to the mothership somehow, influencing all the models.
I wonder. I'll have to check the data privacy policy and see if like HIPAA applies to cats or some other health compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the anomaly configuration worked, but I was cheating a little bit when I was comparing how good Fred and I were compared to Claude, and I misconfigured the MCP server connection. So, which is actually the topic for today. Um, so we can go back to the VM anomaly UI. And what we have here is we've actually overhauled the interface a little bit too. And inside of chat, we can actually tell Claude. I'll actually restart the UI so I'm not cheating. But basically, we can copy a chat in here and say create an anomaly configuration for the last 90 days for the query that tracks the max visits that the cats have had to the litter box over time. And now two things have changed. One, I actually have the MCP server connected correctly. Fred pointed that out like 2 minutes after the stream. And the other thing is we actually updated some of the skills and the preferences for the model. Um, there's a new model inside of VM Anomaly called temporal envelope, which is supposed to solve the same problem that Prophet does, where you have seasonality in data. So, like, my cats might have different usage over time depending on like the season or the day of the week or some other factor, and it's not consistent. But Prophet was an offline model, so whenever you fit the model, you had to fit the whole model, which is a fairly expensive operation. Temporal envelope has the same ability to deal with multiple seasonalities, but it can do fits on increments. So you have one big initial fit, but then each fit after that only has to fit new data on the existing model.
Mm. Is it like a known model or something that Fred came up with?
It's something that Fred came up with.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what inspiration there was behind it, but I was extremely impressed that like from what I understand about time series and machine learning, it's pretty impressive that he was able to make the changes. So now we actually have like tool calls that are behaving correctly, and it's looking over the time series characteristic and getting the time. So now we can take the suggestion and apply it from here. And it should continue to keep cooking. So while we're waiting for Claude to see how it compares to Fred and I while it's behind our back, let's go into how it's architected a little bit. So this stream is supposed to be about AI skills and MCP servers, kind of when they're good and what's different between the two. This has more than just vmanomaly UI, but the concept is the same. Missed one spot though. So basically, the human would go to vmanomaly UI, and then vmanomaly UI is able to talk to the MCP server, which can talk to vmanomaly, which is able to read and write data to and from your VictoriaMetrics instance. So this MCP gives it a set list of tools that it can access, and that context is shared with the model, and then the model is able to go, I need to do this task. Please call this tool to accomplish this task for me. And it's a standardized protocol. So whether you're talking to any one of the VictoriaMetrics products or you're talking to another database or another API, it's the same language for everything.
And it can't be part of the UI itself because it can be reused by something else, right? So you basically a sidecar to vmanomaly. Why can't vmanomaly have MCP built in?
Because Fred hasn't done it yet.
Oh.
It's actually something we're working on. So the MCP server for vmanomaly is a separate process written in Go. And we're planning on releasing a container image that contains both the vmanomaly application and the Go binary for the MCP server. So that way you don't run into the issue that I did where I thought you just had to give, like, here's your Claude API key and say use Sonnet 5 or whatever for the model, and you should be good to go. It's a good question.
It's every time I'm seeing Excalibur and blocks, it's all looking as a solution engineering interview where you have to design a system, you have a couple of blocks, and now you need to put them in the right order.
Yeah. I still have like, I don't think I interviewed with you. I interviewed with Alex, but I still have like that whole interview memorized in my head. And the problem he gave me was actually something that's like a problem we're still trying to solve. And I think he was trying to interview me so he would see how I behave if I didn't know what to do.
Is it really good experience or traumatizing experience?
Yes.
Both.
It's uncomfortable because you feel like you didn't pass a test with 100%. Like you think you're being measured based on accuracy, not your thought process. But it's an interview tactic I've had for multiple jobs where they like keep asking you harder questions until you don't know.
Yeah, it's true. I've had the similar experience when I was getting interviews to other companies before. It was like that. They like asking you what they're trying to solve right now, just to see how you will behave. Maybe you can have a good way of thinking about this, something new, something fresh. And I think it's very nice approach.
So strangely enough, even though I do have the MCP server plugged in correctly, like we're seeing the tool calls from getting vmanomaly, it's still choosing profit. So we'll see how it compares. The nice thing is about the vmanomaly UI is you get a visual representation of what's happening, which is very comfortable for users. The thing that you'll notice with the tools that we're going to be using later is there's less of a representation. So now we should see that the time window changed to 90 days. And if we execute the query, we receive the anomaly data here. And now we can actually see whether or not it detected anomalies, which this looks inaccurate compared to what Fred and I did with temporal envelope. So I think Fred and I are safe from Claude today. We can mark ourselves safe as Claude automating us away today.
Okay, it's the bar is not that high, or is it?
I think this is the demo gods. I forgot to sacrifice a stick of RAM before the stream.
Okay.
So maybe we'll have a revision around 3 between Claude versus Fred and I. So, Roman, you were asking some interesting questions about MCP servers because the other way that you can interface with tools with AI is using skills. So MCP servers came first, but there's a separate process that either runs as like an HTTP server or as a binary that has a set list of tools, which can become a bit of a management burden. And they're also context inefficient. So most of the information about the MCP server gets loaded into context and shared with every query. So somebody came up with the idea of skills, which are just basically a bunch of markdown files, right? You're one of the maintainers of skills, and it's pretty much a bunch of markdown you can install like a JavaScript package, right?
I had experience of writing skills. So I, for VictoriaMetrics specifically, I wrote skill for analyzing query trace and for stream aggregation. And my inspiration or motivation to do this is that, of course, it would be nice to have a very nice documentation that could explain how things need to be done. But I realize that some concepts are very complicated to put them on paper. I mean, you could, but I don't expect that every user could read that much of information and put them into their heads and understand that. So instead of like adding 500 lines of documentation explanation, I try to wrap it in a skill and try to explain it in that skill, because there is no such a limitation for an agent. I mean, not that big as I can write, right? I will not write the whole book. I can write like 500 lines explaining how to do things with all the if clauses, which is very hard to follow in the real documentation. When you start branching the ways in the documentation, it starts looking very bad for user, because they have to follow, and documentation is not the code, and brain is not the compilator to follow those branches. But for agents, it's okay. So I dumped like knowledge of experience of analyzing traces for VictoriaMetrics queries into Markdown file. I explain what are important things to follow. I explain how VictoriaMetrics works underneath when like doing these fan out queries, what could be the bottleneck, what's important to pay attention to. I also like asked to verify if anything changed in the changelog, for example. So agent can go and check that changelog to find if there are any like performance improvements or bug fixes related to the things that it identified. And that worked very nice. Like I really liked how agents could basically compress that knowledge and produce not 500 lines of output, but like 20 lines of output that is easy to read for a mere human. And yeah, I really like the results. I also tested it on a few real cases from the customers, not customers, open source users, sharing their query traces and asking questions like why it is working like it is working. And my conclusions were like very, very similar or very close to what skills with Claude produced to me in the output. Of course, there are sometimes quirks. Sometimes you have to like validate it on yourself. So I don't blindly believe in those skills. But for me, skills is something like a very big instructions that can produce the output that probably you could have missed in your head. Like me understanding how the tracing works, I just can like forget to check the changelog because something was fixed. Maybe I was out that week and I don't have a habit to analyze all the changelogs that we have. But skill is used by machine, and machine do not forget. They do not afraid to do a lot of extra work. So they do it for you, and you as an operator then can analyze that output, assess it if it's valid or no. So I really liked working with skills. And to summarize, I really like that I can put like very complicated concepts into something simpler that other people can use without trying to load all that context in their head.
Forgot the most important part about that. People don't like reading.
I like reading. all, I, all
Specifically
I do.
documentation though. So along with like it being easier to encode, people don't have to read the documentation. Um, like when I was playing with that skill, I was just able to say, "Hey, I have these histograms that are high cardinality I'm not really using. Can you summarize them for me?" Um, I could just live like basically directly inside of my agent, and I didn't have to like alt tab between docs.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally using them to see if it covered something that I didn't think of. Like while agent is working, I'm analyzing skill myself, I'm making my conclusions, and then in the end, I'm checking what agent said. Maybe there is something that I missed, and sometimes there is things that I missed, and then my responsibility as an operator, or how people say AI driver, is to check if that makes sense. And if it makes sense, it's very good. It's basically if like another person helped you with something and they had an alternative way of thinking, and it's very good. And that this is how like we used to work as engineers. We asking other colleagues to help us, or reviewers of your pull request also checking and thinking of something that you didn't think. So as an assistant, it's very nice.
Yeah. Do you ever like leave thought turned on inside of your model? So like you can see its reasoning, and then you read the reasoning and you're just like, oh, I completely missed this. And then you start basically erasing the model to see who can follow that idea through to the end.
Not really. I'm usually just doing something else and checking like after 5 minutes after the output was produced, I'm just returning back to the tab and checking what it produced.
And I started doing that more this weekend too because GLM 5, what eventually became GLM 5.3, was free on OpenCode and OpenRouter. And so I was like not worried about being efficient at all. So I would just sit there and like play video games or guitar while my agent was fixing something.
Mm. hmm Well, I would rather not to see how the agent is thinking, not to impact the way I think, so you don't become the same. I mean, I think it's very important to have diversity of how you think, how other people think, and that's the beauty of having like team of people with different skill set, with different backgrounds, because they can think of problems that you didn't think. And if you will be like sticking to the same model or to the same tool set, and you will be like learning from them, you can be like become similar to them, which will
You
remove,
converge.
remove this
Yeah.
diversity.
Yeah. So do you have any guardrails on your AI agent? Like, is it allowed to touch production, or do you have means of like protecting it?
No, it's not allow. I do not allow. It's always in the plan mode, and also it's limited on what it can touch. I have just a dedicated folder it can read to. I make a like a symbolic link to it so we can read something, but I'm not allowing it to make the edits. I find it. I don't like when agent makes edits for me. Yeah, because I'm losing the consistency then, which I had in my head. If agent something changed, and I can miss that change, or either you like committing every change and then tracking the differences, which is also time consuming. But I'm not against this stuff. It's just my way of using it. I'm completely okay with other people to allow applying changes.
So I don't. One of my favorite parts about the skills is that it allows agents to read observability, or it allows the agent to like view what's going on in the environment without having to touch it. Similar to, I just like treat my AI agent like it's the new guy, and you
hmm
don't want to give the new guy access to prod right away.
hmm
So like I have Hermes set up to always make pull requests so that I can review what it wants to do before it merges and gets deployed to prod and there's a paper trail. So and the nice thing about having a skill that gives it the ability to like read observability data is a much safer default than what it will normally try to do. When I set up Hermes for the first time, I forgot to attach the skill to it. And what it tried to do immediately was like, oh, you want to ask for this thing happening on this server. I'm going to SSH in, try to read a private file. And you're just like, oh gosh.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dangerous. It sounded pretty dangerous to me when you said about creating pull requests, but yeah, that's me.
But because it's creating a pull request like this, it has the same audit trail as if it was like the junior and you're following best practices like infrastructure as code.
Yeah, I'm not against this again, but I'm just reviewing the changes locally in the plan mode, so I can see those changes right in the console before like approving them or doing any amendments. Yeah, but I also like when working with this and they produce any changes. It's what's also I like is that sometimes when you're not sure about how to start a fix or whatever, like start work, or you create in documentation, you create a new model or something, it's complicated to begin. And when you task the agent to do this and then you start reviewing what it did, it's so much easier because you like enter in this review mode and you immediately see when something is not right. And while you're making those comments in your head or just instructing agent how it needs to be right, you already have a mental model, ideal model for you how it should work, and that helps me to start to kick it off.
Yeah. It can be like your rubber ducky almost.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
yeah. One reason why I like doing pull request is you haven't played with like OpenClaw or Hermes agent or anything like that, right?
Nope. Mm-mm.
So I have a instance of Hermes agent running, and Hermes agent doesn't have interface built into it. You can kind of use the web UI to do chats and everything, but most of the communication with like OpenClaw and Hermes happens over Slack. So I run my own Matrix server, which is like decentralized Slack basically. So it's
Mm-hmm.
architected like email where you and I can have our own server and chat back and forth. And I created an account called Boxer, named after the horse and animal farm. And you can just say, "Hey, I have an alert for this issue." So I recently started playing more with Kubernetes and migrated some information over there. And something I wasn't used to was just how many labels Kubernetes adds to things by default. And so I had an alert for too many labels, and I was able to ask the agent, hey, can you fix this alert for too many labels? And without having to touch anything important, it was able to read alert manager information from VictoriaMetrics. Um, and then it was able to check out the individual repo where the requests live. It did check out the wrong repo first, but eventually it checked out the Kubernetes repo instead of the other repo, and it was able to go find what was the actual source of the rules. And because this isn't a great interface for copy pasting code diffs,
Mm-hmm.
I have it trained so that it will go to my local code forge, and then um, it's able to make a pull request on that repo. And if you're using something like Argo CD, as soon as it's merged, it will apply the change. Or if you're not using Kubernetes, there's tools like Ansible AWX or Ansible Semaphore, where you can just tell Hermes, hey, here's the documentation for the Semaphore API. I put a key for you in a secrets manager. You're and you can give it a key where it's only allowed to execute jobs and read them. So then it's similar to a junior where you give it a list of safe things that it can do, and it doesn't have direct access to the environment, and it has an audit trail, and you can follow all the best practices like it was a new junior.
Was it using skills or doing it on its own?
Skills. So Hermes doesn't follow the standard skill format. So basically, if I go like all the way up in the beginning of the chat, the first thing I told it to do was here's the link to the skills repo, add these skills, and then Hermes is able to improve upon itself, which is a good and a bad thing.
Mm.
Um, So if you have like quirks about your environment or a list of like known applications, it can learn that information and update its memory over time and update its own skills over time. But the downside of that is it could do something, it could learn a bad behavior that you don't want it to. So like there's an
Yeah.
example where an executive at a big company lost all of her email because an agent had access not only to read and send email, but also to delete it.
Yeah, that's very subtle behavior of the agents that, like, we treating, you said it yourself, that you're treating it as a junior or like a newcomer person that you don't trust yet, and you just task with simple things and then you verify it. And the thing with real people is that you build in the trust in them, right? You see them, the people improving, real people life improving, they get in more and more knowledge, and you start trusting them because you see that they did multiple good things in a row. Like you start believing in the knowledge that they built in their head and the behavior changes that they adopted, and then doing it right, and then you start like relying on them. With agents, I'm still not sure that it's true. I mean, you can start relying on them, and then in the critical situation, they will produce some nonsense. And because your brain is also trying to optimize the work, it will it will be making you less and less skeptical to the produced output. And you may start believing or trusting those agents more than you should. So keeping that habit of critically view on everything produced is probably the hardest thing right now, because I mean, there are, of course, other ways.
Agents don't have to sleep, or they don't have families that want to spend time with them.
Yeah, that's
They're
true.
cheating.
But they also have zero accountability, right? You can't file the claim to OpenAI saying that it did something bad to your production.
It's unknown. It's like the real life version of the trolley problem, where basically like if it makes a decision, like is it held accountable? There's actually a lawsuit because of the Hugging Face hack, but I don't want to get too far. This is not the right place to get into that.
Okay.
So we actually had a question in chat about which parts of this are open source and which parts are enterprise.
You can answer about all the skills. MCPs are all open source. vmanomaly is enterprise part, I think.
Correct. So even though the MCP server and skills relevant to vmanomaly are open source, you would still need an enterprise license to access them, just because they exist to access vmanomaly.
Yeah, but all the skills, MCP, that's all open source, and I encourage you to explore VictoriaMetrics skills, that they can help you to understand what's happening under the hood without like making you read in all those docs. But the tricky part of all the skills and all the AI output is that it would be very great to verify it. And if you need our help verifying it, there are always like social platforms like Slack and Telegram where you can ask questions. So we'll be happy to help.
Only favor I ask is, if you are debugging with your agent, rephrase the question yourself and don't just copy paste the output of Claude. I've seen questions like that in like other communities, and it just makes me grumpy, where it's like Claude writes in a way that's very expensive for a human to read. Like it writes very verbose. Like most LLMs write in a very verbose way.
Yeah.
That can be challenging to read, so it's like harder as the human on the other end. Plus it's a good teaching tool. Like even just taking notes about it and writing it down yourself is a really good way to help you figure out the issue or think about it.
Yeah, by the way, we were talking today about skills that is, so there is an internal skill which fetches knowledge about like existing things. Like, for example, I don't know how downsampling behaves in VictoriaMetrics. And if you actually check GitHub tickets, there will be a lot of knowledge in regard to downsampling, like some corner cases of a specific user experience in some issues with downsampling, or just like a unique setup. and all that data is distributed across GitHub, or maybe on the Stack Overflow, which is probably already dead, or on some other platform. So there is knowledge like dispersed, spread across all those information. And for one person, if you don't know that that topic about downsampling was discussed somewhere, you just don't know where to look for. So you'd like starting with the docs only, but in fact there are a lot of other knowledge somewhere else, and we have a skill that is supposed to like gather that knowledge and distill it into for you as like if you start troubleshooting, it will collect for you all those references. And I was asking to add a specific instruction to that skill, so it doesn't like produce you a ready summary about what happened about for this downsampling feature, for example, but instead just give you a link so you can go and read yourself, because I think it's important to really understand the problem and really assess all the risks, pros and cons. You have to like go through all that information. You have to put it in your head to understand it better, because that summarizing that agents usually do, it might just lead in the wrong direction and you will miss a critical part of it, because of course they don't have all the context that you have. And when you read in it with your own eyes, you have the context of the problems that you have in your head, and you probably didn't share all of that context with your agent, so it cannot like pick up the right things from the information it reads. It will summarize you something, and as some compression algorithms do, you can lose information. So yeah.
Agents are like way faster at reading the internet too, and most problems aren't limited to one project even. So like I'm slowly trying to move everything over to OpenTelemetry.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, even in VictoriaMetrics, there's knowledge like hidden inside of GitHub issues, or there's knowledge hidden inside of the document. I shouldn't say hidden, but inside of the documentation, and that's multiple sources for one project that can be challenging for a human to read. And then you add in the OpenTelemetry ecosystem, which is huge. Like there's the SDKs, there's at least two different versions of the collector, and then there's all the receivers and exporters inside of there too.
Yeah.
And so if you need help like figuring out if OpenTelemetry collector or VictoriaMetrics or something exists in the relationship between those two things, agents are way faster at reading that.
Yeah, and what's also important, so and how we try to maintain the products inside VictoriaMetrics, we're trying to interlink connected tickets, connected issues, pull requests, discussions, and that also makes it easier for agents to explore, because if they see that link, they will follow just as human does. But if they're not interlinked, this knowledge becomes less connected and it's much harder to explore, and for humans and for agents. So it's very nice practice if you maintain in your own open source project. Do as much interlinking as possible. Connect the similar stuff in the one sequence of discussions that will be helpful in the future for everyone.
Yeah, docs here are fairly good, and we get some of that feedback from customers. Roman had to step away for a second, but while he's gone, I wanted to say nice things about him. YU9WR in chat was very happy about Roman's comments about diversity and like working as a team with your agent rather than delegating everything to it.
Yeah, it's pretending to be wise on my part.
You do a great job. So you said there is a skill that was combing through docs. Do you know which one that is?
Sorry, say it again.
Which skill were you referring to earlier?
The one that I was asking to not produce the output but produce links. It's not published. It's not published yet internally under development.
Okay. We'll have to have a follow-up next. So we've talked a little bit about Hermes Agent and how you can interact through it with chat. There's one other interface that's a bit easier to work with the agent rather than having it do things for you. Like inside of that Hermes thread, you could see I was just like, hey, go fix the thing. or Hermes can even go through and run cron jobs where like if you want to have it triage alerts or try to fix them themselves. Um, that's something I was working on but wasn't able to get done by this month, maybe next month. We'll see. Um, but basically, Hermes can kind of act alone. But if you want a pair programmer, there's different tools that are a little bit better with that. My favorite one's OpenCode. Roman, do you have a favorite AI agent or harness that you use?
Now I'm using Claude in the terminal, and that's mostly it. And sometimes I'm using ChatGPT in the mostly when I'm building mermaid diagrams. So I started using more and more mermaid in the documentation for VictoriaMetrics to explain some basic concepts before we like trying to describe it with words. But I found out that for many people, just even if it's like 3 blocks connected, it's so much easier to see it on the diagram than trying to read the text. And mermaid diagrams is something that where my skills are very low. So I'm usually like asking ChatGPT like, hey, make me a diagram, and then I'm editing the diagram in live editor, and that works for me very nice. So I'm using this Claude for like crunching documentation or analyzing troubleshooting something that will give me the like alternative thought on stuff, and ChatGPT for everything that is like related to like check my wording or build me a diagram, or like why in this project it is happening like this when you need to some lurk on the internet to kind of collect different GitHub issues, etc. That's
So
it.
it's basically you delegated it to different people.
Yeah, mostly.
I anthropomorphize or treat like they're human AI a little bit too much, but it helps me like think about how to achieve a goal with them. And I use a tool called OpenCode. I think you can connect like ChatGPT and Claude with each other, so like you can connect different models from different providers um, with each other. But I like using OpenCode because it's open source and they have a cool subscription service where you can actually like inside of OpenCode Go, you can get everything from like the new GLM models to some of the NVIDIA models all in one place. And I just click a keyboard shortcut and it goes there. I can't use it for work for like compliance reasons, but OpenCode behaves in along with like having the model buffet where I can pick which model I want to use for a certain task inside of one tool. It feels like using Vim. So like it has the notion of buffers and I can like switch sessions and everything. Um, so that's what I use for personal stuff, but for work I have to use what compliance says I can.
Feel sorry for you.
I mean, we have access to like multiple frontier models, so I'm not suffering by any means. I just don't like the way the Claude Code CLI works.
Well, yeah, by the way, do you like now when I remember when I was talking first with you about using AI, you was kind of like against it or not adopting very much. And not that much time has passed since then. I believe it's like a couple of months, maybe a bit more. And you have like right now your adoption is infinitely bigger, higher than it was before. Do you feel yourself more productive with it?
I think so. I'm able to do multiple things in parallel, and there's certain tasks that are machines are way better at. So I maintain a open source project called Shiftmon, where it's like an opinionated version of the VictoriaMetrics stack with Grafana in front, and all the Grafana dashboards now are basically done by agents. So I'm still validating them, and it gets it like 80 or 90% right. And then I just tell them like, hey, you screwed up this panel, or like you forgot this variable. And all I really had to do to make the agent effective was give it a template dashboard. On an instance right now, I actually just have like a template dashboard that has like an example of how to do everything. or like it has an example of every panel that I want it to do. So it has an example of like how to do HTTP latency, an example of how to visualize a histogram, and then it can use those as building blocks to help everything else.
That's nice. I also have very positive experience with building dashboards. So I was making two repos for VictoriaMetrics, one called AI observability and second GPU observability. That's basically like monitoring applications that use an AI capabilities, like talking to open AI provider or something else, and using the BPF to expose some metrics from it, and also SDK to expose metrics from the communication with the mothership. And for make this project nice, I had to build a looking nice dashboard for Grafana. And even though I have big experience of building dashboards, it's always super time consuming stuff. I don't know why, because I'm slow or because Grafana is making it harder for people to make it, but it's always complicated thing. So I built dashboard using AI, and it like crunched very nice looking thing. You know, that the nice looking thing which sells you a dashboard because it has all the nice colors and they're looking nice. And because it was a demo project, it was like not about correctness. It was mostly about what signals we have and how they can be represented. So Claude, in my case, went to VictoriaMetrics, explored all the label values. I didn't even give it a skill, but because VictoriaMetrics mimics Prometheus API and VictoriaMetrics itself is popular open source project, like the Claude just knew how to talk to it. It explored everything. It understood cardinality. It understood which labels split signals, and built very nice dashboards representing it. Like if you check, for example, GPU observability, it looks so nice. I really like. I never built such nice looking dashboards in my life, even though I tried very hard. But it's just not like I don't have that visual taste probably as this soulless machine has. And yeah, I liked how fast it builds those dashboards. I didn't give any references though. I just instructed it briefly, like explore the signals, identify the most important ones. Here's how you can check what important on other resources and build those signals. And I don't even know if I never used Grafana Cloud. And I know in Grafana Cloud, they have like AI assistants that builds dashboards to you. But frankly, with what Claude can do for me, with at that time it was Opus 4.6, I didn't feel need to use something specialized for that. Like that model did very good job. So yeah, I'm looking forward to automating this stuff, to which I'm not very good.
You should try like giving it a reference dashboard or even telling it to use the VictoriaMetrics ones for inspiration and see if you get better results. But
VictoriaMetrics dashboards do not look nice. They I put a lot of effort to make them informative and put a lot of description, like troubleshooting sequence. Like if you see this panel misbehaving, then go to another panel and see if this anomalies correlate. But it's not looking nice.
Yeah. We have some. So we have some questions in chat about how do we make basically agents aware of our environment, which is actually one of the topics we need to get to here pretty quick so we don't run over. So they basically had like a map inside of the company is what it sounds like, where they had service resource models, where they were able to use that for root cause analysis because it gave a graph. Tracing can provide some of that. So I know VictoriaTraces with the VictoriaTraces has the ability to deal with the service map API. For infrastructure, it's a bit challenging because I don't think there's an equivalent for Prometheus. The way I deal with it is using the agents.md. So there's a standard called agents.md, which is basically a markdown file that you can feed your agent, and you can put the equivalent of that inside of agents.md. So give me 1 second to pull that up. So here's my agents.md. So basically, you can describe the environment. You can describe the environment and what tools to use. So I can say, hey, this is mostly a bunch of Ansible rules to deploy things to Linux VMs. Um, you can tell it how to make dashboards, and if you use something like make or just, you can tell it, like you can describe the just file to it. So then if it needs to deploy OpenCode or deploy OTel collector, it knows how to do those things.
So sorry, I like that you have not marked as bold here. I mean, like, do not name a dashboard. Like, first time I was making a skill and I wanted it to print like a summarizing table, and it was adding columns that I didn't want to that table, even though like I told which columns I wanted. For some reason, Claude didn't follow my advice, and I was asking one of our engineers who was much more familiar with AI at that time, Zahar, and he told me like you have to write it in caps, and I was like, what? You have to scream at your model. Like, it sounds so stupid. I put it in caps and it followed my advice, but I still can't believe that you have to do this. I mean, it's so weird that you have to like emphasize this. Why it just doesn't listen to you?
It reminds me of the XKCD comic where you say sudo make me a sandwich and then it works. If you yell at it in caps.
Yeah.
I'm one day I want to see, like, I've heard people talk about how mean they are to their agents. I want to read one of those someday.
You know about this like Rocco Basilisk? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but like a concept of that artificial intelligence once become like the superpower and will start punishing everyone for not behaving good. So you have to start behaving good like right now, because that superpower will have access to everything that you said or did before and will punish you for that. So you
I'm deadly afraid of that because have you ever followed like Boston Dynamics? They make really elaborate like humanoid and dog-like robots.
of course.
You've seen the testing footage, right? Where they're just like whacking it with a hockey stick and like knocking boxes out of its hands. It's like if those machines ever become self-aware, I'm scared.
Yeah. Yeah, I like your map. So you basically here in the markdown, you're describing your environment and the tools that you have.
Yep.
Right. And that's like goes as a context to the agent.
Correct. And if you adopt open telemetry, some of this might come out of the box for you because OTel has semantic conventions. So no matter what language you're using, some of the labels will be identical. And you can see in here we have RustFS as a service name. So even if you have like a heterogeneous environment like I do, where you have some stuff that uses Telegraph and some stuff that's getting moved over to OpenTelemetry, you can help your agent by saying like, this is how to find the service name for RustFS, which is actually something I had it debug for me. So object storage is currently in testing for VictoriaLogs, and I wasn't sure if it was my cursed object storage setup or a bug in VictoriaLogs for why it was crash looping. So basically, what would happen is after VictoriaLogs would start, it would try to read something off of object storage, and then inside of object storage, the metadata.json inside of that part would say, hey, you have this part, and then it would try to read that part and it wasn't existing. And I was curious if it was a bug in RustFS or inside of VictoriaLogs. And so I was actually able to just ask a very plain English question. Hey, I see 503 errors for RustFS when uploading to VictoriaLog storage, find the root cause. And it was able to just look inside of the repo like it doesn't have SSH access to anything, and then look through all the Docker Compose files to poke around and see like where RustFS is deployed, where VictoriaLogs is deployed, and then just ask the VictoriaLogs deployment or the VictoriaMetrics logs and traces deployment to see everything that's going on.
So did it did it figure out what it was?
Yes, it was RustFS. So Fwong can rest easy tomorrow. I actually told him in Slack too that it was a problem with my curse storage. Basically, my object storage is backed by spinning Rust, which for metadata operations is incredibly slow. So when VictoriaLogs goes through and uploads all the partitions at the same time, those metadata operations bottleneck and start to time out. And because it's a multi-part upload, part of the upload can succeed and part can fail.
So wait, does this RustFS do not communicate the error back? It's like accepts and writes and then silently fails inside, or it communicated back and VictoriaLogs didn't handle
My
it?
understanding is that VictoriaLogs sees that it's a 503, but it doesn't know what in that multi-part upload made it. So it can retry it. I'll have to investigate more.
Yeah, room for improvement for VictoriaLogs too, I think.
Yeah. Because I'm wondering if it's a good idea or not to allow, like, you can't mount object storage, but don't crash about it, or what trade-offs exist there. And there was one issue in my environment, but that's an engineering best practices thing and a Proxmox thing, not a VictoriaMetrics thing. So after it was able to make a bunch of requests out for RustFS and VictoriaLogs, it was able to, let's go through the tool calls. I was thinking really hard about this. It was able to determine that the 503 errors were RustFS bottlenecking on metadata. So I was able to determine that, okay, I need to improve storage performance, or it thought the hard drives were dying. It wasn't a performance bottleneck, but Proxmox doesn't export smart data by default. Are you familiar with smart?
Nope.
Smart's the standard that hard drives use to determine their health. So smart data will say, like, what's the drive temperature, what's the number of hours this has been powered on, and how many times it's been cycled. And so it can determine based on the write errors inside of that drive whether or not it's healthy, or if it's throwing any errors on the hard drive. Proxmox doesn't send that out over the metrics API by default. There's probably a way I could deploy, like, Telegraph directly on the hypervisor, or some other, basically add some package to the hypervisor to forward that data. Like for normal Linux machines, I do that all the time, but hypervisors, you're not supposed to do that. So that was a challenge. I had to revert to basically sending it the smart, like a screenshot of the smart output from Proxmox, which was kind of gross.
Sometimes I think that, with great power comes with great responsibility, and all those agents piping through themselves so much data can be actually like misleading. I mean, not misleading, like pushing them to the wrong direction. So you shared your positive use case of using agent and troubleshooting it for you. So I will share my negative experience of using agent to troubleshoot. So for those who don't know, we make in bi-weekly releases of VictoriaMetrics. Like every 2 weeks, we make in a new release, no matter of. We just making cut, and everything that went to the upstream at that moment gets released. That's how we like not panic about features that didn't make it. We just doing it like this, as simple. If feature didn't make it, well, make it next time. That makes our minds easier on making release decision. And to verify that the new release is not impacting, not degrading anything, and everything like performs in the same way, no regressions, we also maintain 3 public benchmarks. So we have upstream version of VictoriaMetrics, like the latest one, and we have 2 LTS cluster installations. And we push benchmarks continuously, like they working for years already, pushing the same sets of data into all 3 installations. And when we make a release on Friday, the release engineer just publishing this new release candidate and updating these benchmarks. And we leave it for a weekend. So it gets updated on Friday, it works through Saturday, Sunday, and on Monday, the release engineer checking the metrics using our own dashboards and alerts to see if any degradation happened. And recently we had a visible regression of latency from VM alert queries increased by 40%. And it was very suspicious, and it's clearly a regression. And one engineer spent time and didn't figure out what it was. And I tried to understand it too. And I thought, like, well, it's like ideal case for agent. It has access to historical data. It has access to the current metrics. It can investigate and find all those differences. And I tasked Claude to do this. And Claude crunched tons of information. It produced one hypothesis, second hypothesis, third hypothesis, and all those hypotheses were wrong. And I personally spent like 1 hour talking to that agent, trying to like validate hypotheses, because all the hypotheses it provides, they are like very looking like the correct ones. It looks like truth, but in fact it is not. And if you look carefully and you ask more questions, you will find out that not everything, like it can say that these two signals correlate, but in fact it was checking correlation on shorter time period and didn't compare it on longer time period. And from the console output, you don't see that. You have to verify it with your own eyes. And all these three hypotheses were wrong. And when I tried to troubleshoot it myself, I noticed what was wrong just by looking on the graphs. I've seen that before the update, the request rate was steady and latency was lower. And after update, request rate started looking more spiky. It wasn't like clear, noticeable spike, but I just saw that shape of the request rate changed and latency changed and memory consumption on vmselect changed. And when looking closer to that, I know that requests are going from the VM alert, which is executing alerting rules. And that's like part of the read load on the benchmark. I noticed that, and with help of Max, who is our team lead on the open source metrics, we noticed both that it just happened that VM alert instance started scheduling two groups of rules very close to each other. And before that update, the rules were like more dispersed in the time. They were like happening on the like spread it over time interval. And that means that vmselect in the one moment of time was processing less alerts, less read queries. But after update, those queries, they started coming in the shorter time windows. And at one moment of time, vmselect had to process like 4 rules instead of 2. And this is why memory consumption increased. And this is why latency increased, because it was just like doing more work at one unit of time and then not doing any work at all after this time interval. And it was like I identified it by just looking at the graphs and having this experience of understanding, because I will remind you that graphs on the dashboards, they made for people, because this is how people can perceive big volumes of data, by looking on the nice lines and seeing patterns on those nice lines. That information is made for people to consume. This is what our eyes and our brains are trained for. And agents apparently are trained on consuming raw data, and they might not see those patterns as clearly as people do. And that was just my example of agent took 1 hour of my time and running tons of checks and still produced like only misleading hypothesis. And if I would be like less experienced, I will just agree on the first hypothesis that it provided because it was looking like truth, and like responding that this happened because this hypothesis. But luckily, we found the root cause, and there was no regression in the VictoriaMetrics. So you can be
That was like a week-long wild goose chase for the two of you, right? Like we were worried for like a week or two that like there was a regression in VM alert.
Well, yeah, VM alert regression was not this. It wasn't a regression, but the fact that they were collocated closer in the time was identified like in the first day, and then there was after that the priority of the degradation was decreased, because we knew that it's not fault of VM select, not fault of VM storage, that the cluster components are fine. So the VM alert investigation was postponed a bit and was investigated later. That's why it took so much time. And we found out that it was just dependent on the moment when VM alert starts, and how those groups in the time when in the time bucket they fall, those two groups, because it was basically dependent on when VM alert starts. And it happened this time that VM alert started in the time interval when those two groups were allocated in this way. In the production system, it's always more rules and more groups, so this will be just not noticeable. The memory usage in our case was noticeable because we were dealing with pretty low amount. I mean, memory increase was like 30% on the VM select, but we're talking about consumption from 20 to 150 megs to 290 megs. So absolute values are very low. In the production, that will be not noticeable. So it was not like a real regression. It was just coincidence that happened and distracted us.
Yeah, I had a similar, it hasn't all been sunshine and roses with LLMs. If you're familiar with like OpenBow or HashiCorp Vault, policy management for that is not the most intuitive thing in the world, especially the first couple times you do it. And I had my agent looking at the metrics and logs from OpenBow, and again, highly sensitive thing. I don't want to have it like SSHing into the machine where it's running and like it potentially having access to sensitive information. So all I had to do is just say, hey, fix this policy issue. And then it ended up struggling with it for an extremely long period of time too. And I actually texted my friend about like, I think AI has caught up to humans because I think it was like Kimi K3 or the new Kimi model was just struggled just as much as I did to figure out how to set policies in Vault. Except I think that session for Kimi K3 was like $3 and I'm more expensive than that. Yeah. I think this is a good place to wrap. We don't have any other questions in chat. Next month, I think it's still up in the air. I believe we might be doing some talk about some of the recent Go blogs that have spun back up from Jesus, who's one of our newer folks on the team. And if you want to see us in person, November 9th through the 12th in Salt Lake City, we will be at KubeCon as a silver sponsor. We will be at All Things Open in Raleigh, North Carolina on October 19th and 20th. And we have We Are Developers September 23rd through the 25th in San Jose.
And PromCon, you forgot the PromCon.
I was just reading off the notes. We're Diamond sponsor at PromCon, right?
Well, it's not about sponsoring. Like, I mean, yeah, we're Diamond sponsors, but I found it more interesting that the talk from VictoriaMetrics was accepted to PromCon, which is very nice. I really appreciate the PromCon as conference and the level of technical talks on it. And I will be having talk about cardinality estimator. That's a tool developed by our Max Katlar, who is a team lead, as I mentioned before, of VictoriaMetrics. He created a tool based on the cooperation with one of our customers that can measure time series cardinality in flight. It can basically produce you like estimation of the cardinality, very, very accurate estimation, like with 1 minute granularity. And then you can build your alerting rules that will ping you if, I don't know, some specific job or a label. Like you can basically define cardinality tracking on whatever you want. Will notify you if that will change, like increase or drop, so you can react much faster. And it's very good thing because it like costs you almost nothing to alert on that. Because if you're familiar with cardinality tracking in Prometheus or in VictoriaMetrics, checks of those APIs to calculate cardinality on something is expensive. And that takes a lot of resources. That's why you can't
full index, right?
Yeah, and that's why you can't like exploit it too much. But with this cardinality estimator, it's free. You can check it as much as you want at what granularity you want, and it's very nice. And there will be talk about this measuring cardinality in flight. So if you visit in PromCon, find us there and visit our talk. And of course, talks of other participants. It's always very nice technical conference that I very like.
And PromCon's in Munich, Germany, correct?
Yep. It's 7th, 8th of October, if I'm not mistaken. So something like that. First dates of October.
Sorry, the American habit, things not happening here just kind of fall out of my head.
Yeah.
Great. And if you can't make it to any of those, there's always GitHub, our public Slack. We'll have those in the description of the video. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay. Goodbye.